Welcome to NLTV Season 2, Episode 4. There we go. So this week we are recording live from the Succot. This is our Back to Nature edition.
Yes, and what a beautiful sukkah it is. Indeed, you put a lot of effort and work into this.
I love the sukkah. I love
it's really
the sukkah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And especially this little creative work from
my daughter
Abigail.
made that. Yes, Abigail
unbelievable.
made that.
So very environmentally friendly, recycling.
Well, we can't see all around, but
beautiful, really beautiful
mostly
sukkah.
decorated by the kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
So Succot.
I think it's important to get the kids involved, especially with the mitzvah of the Succot, because at the end of the day, we're going back to nature, we're under the elements, and this is how our ancestors lived, relying on Hashem.
That's right.
But, this is our emunah, our trust and bitochen in Hashem. Sadly, it was raining the whole Yom Tov, so we had to cover over this chach. But, we still do it. It's a mitzvah. We try our best.
Yeah.
And again, it's back to basics, which is really what 2020 has been all about. Back to basics, really the core of life and the core of everything, of what's really important in life. And here we are, we're sitting outside, we're eating outside, weather permitting. I'd like to sleep here as well, but that hasn't happened.
And we had some people back in shul. I mean, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was unbelievable.
It was beautiful.
Beautiful.
So nice. I didn't eat a thing.
And we didn't have NLTV.
Yeah, we missed NLTV last week. That must have been the
food, no
part.
TV.
Yeah, because it was Monday, you see.
That's right. But the shul was really packed to capacity. I mean, obviously socially distanced and all.
It was very nice atmosphere, and people there obviously wanted to be there.
And felt safe. I think a lot of people felt safe with the different services that spoke to different needs, and I think it was really something special. And we really encourage people to come back after that. Yom Tov, it was a little less, I think, over Succot.
Yeah.
Hoshana, it was, but the guidelines are and restrictions.
Oh, we're following everything.
The safety measures are still in place.
Any rule, any stringency we're doing. I had a good idea. While we're doing the Hoshanas, following people around the bim, if you hold your lulav that way, horizontally, that will ensure your 2 meter social distancing.
Absolutely, and I think that's why we have even an extra measure over Sukkot to be able to do that. And so, like you said, this week we're doing an environmentally friendly edition, and Jonny Waxman prepared a beautiful video. Many of us might have even seen it. We featured it on our Facebook page and shared it on our WhatsApp social.
Yeah, endorsed by the Chief Rabbi himself.
That's right.
For the work that Jonny's been doing.
And Rabbi Friedman, sits down with Jonny to talk about it and how he got involved, what inspired him to make this video. So let's go over and see what he has to say.
Hey Jonny, what an amazing piece that you've put together. Your work is so inspirational. I have to tell you, for me it's been eye-opening. Tell our NLTV viewers how you became interested in this vital work.
Hi Rabbi Friedman, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it a bit more. So this is the culmination, I would say, of a life of thinking about different things, and everything that I've done in my life in some way contributes to, I think, and this is for everybody as well, contributes to who you are at a certain point in time. When I went to university, I studied electrical engineering at Imperial College with Professor Babel's father, Professor Babel, and at the end of that, I spent a lot of time thinking about engineering, and I did a master's in environmental sciences, which was very interesting, and I learned lots about energy.
So you go way back.
This was in 1986.
Wow. That's like pioneering work at the time.
It was an interesting course, and I was inspired by books such as Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, and Small is Beautiful by Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher, and there was a global report put together by, I think, President Carter in the 1970s called Report on 2000. And I became interested in all these things, and of course there was a very influential group called the Club of Rome who put together a book called Limits to Growth, trying to understand what the limits to growth will be within the resources that we have on planet Earth.
But that was about population.
No, that was more about physical resources such as metals, fossil fuels, I think their projections were mostly wrong, but it's an interesting thought experiment, and people have spent a lot of time thinking about Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus is an economist who, informed by the way Charles Darwin's work in the 19th century, Malthus was a person who looked at scarcity and said inevitably humans will become impoverished by scarcity as population growth, and we see that in all kinds of natural systems that animal populations reach. Natural. I don't want to get diverted into conversation of population, but Malthus was generally regarded as a failed philosopher, and I think that's entirely wrong. Human ingenuity does solve problems, but scarcity is nonetheless an issue. The question is where the limits and boundaries are. I think Malthus is probably early rather than wrong, and we are now testing the boundaries of what the safety is on our home planet. Human population is much smaller than human population. It's larger now. Our use of resources, more relevantly, is much larger per person than it was then. So,
to what degree?
Probably 2 orders of magnitude, a factor of 100. Humans
Wow.
probably use a factor of 100 more resources now than they did at the time of Malthus, who was writing in the early 19th century. So I became interested in these things. I then, like most people, had to think about how to earn a living, and I went to work as a trader at a bank called Solomon Brothers, and I was there, and then I became a fund manager, and for 25 years I had a career in finance, and it was a sort of corner of finance which is very quantitative, because I've always been interested in numbers and analysis, and I'm quite a focused person, so the kind of job of really focusing on what was happening and putting together kind of the puzzle of financial markets I found very interesting. It's not an area of finance that most people would readily associate. It's not stuff you'd read in the papers. It's more about computer modelling and understanding relationships between different financial assets. Quite arcane, but I find it very interesting. It's a bit like solving a real-time jigsaw puzzle as things are going along, and kind of responding to different stimuli from the environment. It's very interesting.
You were paid to do Rubik's Cubes.
I was paid to do Rubik's Cubes largely, and I met a lot of very interesting and intelligent people, and I really enjoyed that work. It was really interesting. But the interesting thing about trading is you're forced to sort of draw on a very wide range of information to try and understand the puzzle in real time. So I sort of got into the habit of thinking about things quite broadly, but in a shallow kind of way. Trying to understand key points. That was one thing. And the other thing about trading is most traders go bankrupt. Almost all traders kind of, because you'll take risks ultimately, that you're taking a lot of risk. Well, some people don't like taking risk. I quite like taking risk, but I also am very tuned to risk management. So there's a saying, there are old traders and there are bold traders, but there are no old bold traders. Because
there's only so many chips you can put down on the table.
Absolutely, there's only so many chips, and every so often something comes along which is entirely outside that range of experience which you're used to. So I was tutored in this quite early on in my career, when I was a year only working for 6 months, I think, at Solomon Brothers. In 1987, there was a stock market crash. It was a couple of weeks before my first daughter, Rochelle, was born. Rochelle grew up in Norris Lee, and she lives locally now. She herself has a little one. Just thought I'd get a bit of nationals in while we're talking. And the stock market fell by an amount that no one had ever seen before in a single day. And that destroyed many institutions and people. And you start to think about unlikely events that happen rarely and have massive impact. And it tends to be that humans are not very good at integrating that kind of event into their thinking. They're good at thinking about things that happen reasonably frequently and that could have moderately bad impacts and moderately good impacts. They're not as good at processing things that might happen infrequently, and they tend to underestimate the frequency of them, and they tend to take risks which would not be warranted if they properly thought about those things. Maybe it could be paralysing to live like that. But I've now financially lived through a number of these sorts of things, and I've sort of seen that actually more frequently imagined. And of course, we're living through exactly such an event, and governments hadn't probably. I'm not a I'm not an epidemiologist, not a public health person, but I think probably in hindsight we would say we could have prepared better for a pandemic. Maybe I'm not an expert on that, and I wouldn't like to say, but
I think
it does show
on
you
the political cycle. It's on the on the political cycle. They don't like planning ahead because there's nothing in it for them right now.
Exactly, and you have to divert resources and energy to it. And interestingly enough, I believe that countries in Southeast Asia have had better outcomes in the COVID-19 crisis. And I think that's because they had a similar crisis they went through about 10 years ago with the SARS and MERS. So they've sort of been through this kind of drill. Actually, they didn't have anything like the impact, but they'd got used to mask wearing, for example. They thought about social distancing, and these things were more ready to kind of push into action. If we had another such crisis, God forbid, in 10 years' time, we would be much better prepared, but we'd understand better how to deal with it, I think. So there were two things in my career. There was my original thinking about the environment, then there was my work, and I became attuned to thinking about risks, and I've always been interested in science. I've always read a lot about science. That's been sort of my hobby, and being my sort of thinking about Judaism is very much attuned to thinking about how does Judaism make the world a better place? What's its contribution? So people have different perspectives to why Judaism is important to them. I don't come from background, so it's not like I'm keeping on sort of many generations. I became from around my bar mitzvah, and my parents were always socially conscious aware. That was sort of their philosophy, and I sort of, I suppose, I've melded those two things in my mind. So when I'm thinking about my Torah and Mitzvot, I'm thinking about what is it about Torah and Mitzvot that makes the world a better place. So I sort of got all these jumble of things going in my mind. Climate change is something that I'd sort of thought about from my degree, but to be honest with you, it's the crisis has sort of come on us in the last 20 years. There were opportunities, maybe there were not opportunities, maybe there were opportunities, but the time to tackle this was about 20 years ago. We have to tackle it now. It doesn't sort of absolve us from tackling it now, but it's a bit harder, it's more uphill now. And I've been thinking about climate change. Most of my work has been around climate change for the last 10 years, and I only really will work now on things that have an impact on tackling climate change, because that's what I feel kind of the shat dechak is. That's what the the need of the moment is. The tzorach hasha. Sorry. I could have made this video any time in the last 5 years, but sometimes people's ears are not open to thinking about something. I think my friends, my family know that it's something that I think a lot about, but you have to get a bit past a stage where people know it's important to me, they think it's sort of my hobby, and they move to where they're willing to listen to it being about them, about their children, about their grandchildren. And I think we got to that point, and interestingly enough, I think what really pushed it was the demonstrations and all the kind of young people getting involved. And I know that not everyone agrees with that. I know that's a kind of divisive thing. But I don't think there's much doubt that it has, from the 2015 Paris Accord and some publicity surrounding that, and then kind of the various demonstrations and protests. And you could argue that they're kind of way off the political spectrum, but they've moved where the conversation can be, and they've moved people's minds about it. And I felt that at the sort of in the last year or so, there's been a window where I can talk to people about it, and they'll feel that it's not just nutty, that there is something profound that we need to think about, we need to take care of. And the Chief Rabbi obviously is leading with this now, which I find very inspiring, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's amazing, man.
Yeah. So that's a long answer to a short question. But sometimes, so when I say everything in my life has been leading up to it, I do think that is the case.
I have to tell our viewers who, if anybody has not seen it yet, it's remarkable how you have really simplified and articulated something that, unless somebody's part of the conversation, and sometimes you can open up the news and you feel like you're reading the middle of a book, and you don't know What's the background? What's the context? Where am I up to? Is this meaningful? I read op-eds on, you know, people who might be skeptical in one angle without knowing that, you know, on the whole, you know, there's a lot of agreement here. And for you, the way that you laid it out so clearly, and I think it's just a, you know, climate change 101 for everyone, and I think it's mandatory reading for everyone of all ages, from teenagers to seniors.
Right, you're talking about the booklet now.
And the booklet, but more, and between the booklet and the video clip, yeah, which masterful work. I think that, you know, both of them just.
So I wanted to say, I made a version of that video with just me talking and the clips and everything, exactly the same script, but it didn't speak. And the person who has brought it to life with me wanted me not to mention his name, but I want to tell his name anyway because B'Shem Amra is very important. You say something. So Gary Crystal really helped me, and he's a brilliant film director and screenwriter. He's not available to work on people's pet projects in general, but we worked together on a couple of other things, and he agreed to put us together for me. So I really can't let them pass without thanking Gary.
Well, Gary.
Because I've had feedback on the first version and the post-Gary version. There was no comparison between the two versions.
Well, it's excellent. It's excellent. But as I say, you know, just as much about. I mean, obviously, one has to present and package properly. But your content, the way you elucidate, is just phenomenal. So
thank you very much. The actual science is really not that complicated. I mean, if you want to build a computer model for the whole of the atmosphere and the Earth, it's extremely complex. But the basic principles do not rely on something controversial or abstruse. I mean, they've been really understood for 150 years now. It's a good science tradition going back to 1850 with John Tyndall in Manchester, Eunice Foote. There's just a lot of Arrhenius in Scandinavia. A lot of people sort of came across this idea at the same time. And it's just really very simple science. The exact amount of warming which it engenders is, you know, 3 centigrade for a doubling of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, plus or minus a degree, and it's kind of been around that. And so I don't really think that it's a very complicated idea to understand.
I think what happens is those with particular agendas manage to complicate things and make things look very complicated, yes, and convoluted. But I think that you really lay it out very clearly and make it, really an argument that, you know, is. Yeah.
You make a very important point, but I don't think it's a bit of a side diversion as to why the discussion is so clouded for the last 10 years. But I have my views on that, but I don't think
it's always going to be. I mean, you mentioned in the book there's politics, there's economics, there's people have agendas.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So let's talk to the Judaism side of things. Yeah. I think it was very eye-opening for me. Just obviously, I've given shiurim in the past on environmentalism, and I'm familiar with, you know, some of the basic texts. But just to look at the way that you presented them, you know, I saw things from a whole new perspective. And one of the things that struck me was the mitzvah to look after the planet, which, you know, you talk to some people and they say, well, is it really a mitzvah? Is it not a mitzvah? And I want to, you know, you and I were talking a little earlier about the concept of how the mitzvahs even are applied and given to us. And what strikes me is we know that the Gemara says that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. What's interesting is that the Gemara never tells us what those 613 commandments actually are. And so we get to medieval times, beginning with the Baal Halachos Gedolos, and then later the Rambam, Maimonides, and Ramban, Nachmanides, who begin to debate what exactly are those 613. They go through the Torah, we know it's in the 5 books, and they try to pinpoint what are the 613, which are they? Now, if you look at the counts, there are a number of different counts. I mean, they all center on, focus on the same basic mitzvahs. it'll just be, some will say, well, this is a primary mitzvah, this is a sprout of that mitzvah. But no matter how they start it, there's something that seems to be almost missing. There are some that start with belief in God, others that start with us as a nation accepting that we have control over time with Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the month. And then there are others that start with the first mitzvah that seems, the first actual commandment given to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. That's not really where it begins. It says that God places humankind into the garden, like you say, la'avda or l'shamra, to work it and to guard it, which is almost an implicit mitzvah that's never mentioned. And how do I know that implicit mitzvah could be a mitzvah? Well, we have a proof in the Gemara that talks about the 10 sayings with which God created the world. And if you open it up, there's really only 9 sayings. And God said, "Thou shalt be light," and there was light. And there's only 9 of them. So the Gemara concludes, well, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashmayim v'et haaretz is an implicit saying with which God must have created the world. He must have said something. So I think we have something implicit here. God places Adam and Eve into the garden to work it and to guard it. I don't know your thoughts on that, Johnny. Is that a mitzvah, would you say?
Well, firstly, I'm not really. It's a very nice Kiddush. It's a very nice Kiddush. I wouldn't really say I'm particularly qualified to opine on that. But the Chief Rabbi also mentioned this point, I think, in his very kind introduction to the video. I think, would it have been, I think if you look at the Torah in a whole, there's a lot of agricultural content in the Torah. It's almost written for a farm. I mean, everyone then basically was a farmer. Maybe there's some Kohanim and some Leviim, which are Levi, I know, but most of us were farmers.
Agrarian society.
It was an agrarian society. So I think the idea of looking after your garden would have been common sense to people. I'm not really sure it would have really been something that you would have to command someone to do, really. I mean, if you have a farm and you don't look after it and it goes to rack and ruin, you're going to not have what to eat next year. So I'm not sure if it would have been a mitzvah. I think, but maybe Gan Eden, I saw the way I was thinking about Gan Eden was the whole planet. We never had an opportunity really to not look after the planet as a whole, to be honest with you, in the past. But I have this idea that the Torah is a very living kind of document and has different things for every generation who live there. So maybe for our generation, maybe it could be one of the Tariq. I'd like to think it's one of the Tariq mitzvahs. It seems very fundamental to me.
I think it's almost,
what are the halachas? Can you imagine all the halachas?
Well, I think there are, and I'll tell you why. As I'm thinking this through, you have to understand from the perspective of the medieval commentators, and I think this, like you say, it is a chiddush, and it's, who am I to join a conversation amongst our great poskim of all time? But these questions of global questions almost wouldn't have occurred to them because there was no notion of beyond my field, beyond my patch. Is there any way that I can guard the world? And it was almost as if Adam and Eve didn't need to guard Gan Eden. It took care of itself. So there was a message that's built into the system, speaking to us, maybe that would only reveal itself in the 21st century.
That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, and then when you talk about what are the halachas, we think about, I think one of the things that people struggle with is, so if I take a plastic bag, if I use a plastic bag at the supermarket, or I take my reusable bag, is it really going to change anything?
Yes.
And I think when you think this through, it doesn't make a difference. I mean,
yes,
it doesn't.
You're right.
From God's perspective, if it is a mitzvah, la'avda or l'shamra, then all I have to do is bring my reusable bag. God is not asking me about outcomes. He's asking me about effort. Every little thing that I do, mitzvah. Mitzvah point, brownie point, every time. So every time I have that struggle, do I use a plastic plate or do I take a plate and wash it? Mitzvah. If I make the right decision. Yeah. That would be the halacha.
Absolutely. We don't look at the outcome of us keeping Shabbos.
Exactly.
It's not part of the consideration. And I have wondered for a while whether Rabbanim might think about saying, for example, that single-use plastic is great, and what the impact would be on Jewish communities. I think particularly, I'm not sure about our own community, but I certainly think in the more rabbi-led, if you like, world, I don't really like to lump people together, but there are many communities where Das Torah is an important doctrine, where what the rabbi says is really very mandatory, and if the rab said to them, you can no longer use single-use plastic, I think that they would do that. I don't think you would ask a question about it.
I mean, communities where they placed a major taboo on smoking or on large weddings, it had an impact.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are others that, they didn't, probably because those at the top may not have been able to abide by such restrictions in either of those categories.
Yeah.
But in many communities, they said,
but
these are no longer.
There's a tension there. Maybe those Rabbonim only require things they think their Kehillah will be able.
That's true.
So maybe there's kind of a back and forth there. But I do think that those Rabbonim themselves don't have it in their minds that single-use plastic is a problem, or that other things. I mean, what I find, I don't want to spend too much time on plastic, but when I raise climate change with friends or in an institutional setting, the conversation very quickly moves to plastic, not using plastic. Not using plastic is super important, but it's a different problem than climate change. And there are some linkages, but I think the climate change problem is much more important than the plastic problem. I think they're both really important problems. I don't want to diminish the importance of tackling plastic. We need to tackle the use of particularly single-use plastics. But I do think that I don't want every climate change conversation to become about plastic. I get that experience a lot, which is, I just want to say again, the conversation of plastic is very important, but the conversation of climate change is really very important.
So you believe that as I understand it, that ultimately the major impacts are going to come from government decisions.
I do.
And so what can we do then as individuals?
It's a very interesting question. It's one I spend a lot of time thinking about. So I think that to some extent we need to work together to change things. I'll tell you my purposes. I don't want to really kind of say this is right or this is wrong, and these are choices that I was able to make, and lots of people can't make such choices. But I decided to work on things which are related to tackling climate change, for example. Very few people have that luxury, but I did. I'll only invest in things now which are climate positive in some way, that have an impact. So those were the two biggest changes that I made. So I put in my time and effort, and I think about, and I think those are obviously very useful, very important things. I think that, I haven't, for example, stopped flying. I have children who live in Israel, and I'm not saying that aviation is not an important problem, but it's lower down the order of the things that we need to do to tackle climate change.
I think there was a report just the other day that within a few years they'll have brought out a plane that will be very low carbon or zero carbon.
It's possible. They're working on it. They need to work on it, and on biofuels and other ways of making aviation low carbon. For sure, that's a technological problem that I really can't. I think it's a difficult technological problem. I read a bit about it, but it represents probably about 5% of the climate problem. Aviation, it's a growing share.
Where's the biggest problem?
The biggest problem, for me personally, for every member of your community, if we set aside flying, because we fly a lot more than the average human on the planet does, if we set that aside for a second, two things, your car and how you heat your home. Now, enormously already, the road where I live, there are already loads of electric cars, and electric cars are the solution to the transport carbon problem. We can fully tackle climate change within the transport sector using electrification of transport. I think that's something which is already in chain, but I would say most members of our community should give serious thought to never buying another petrol or diesel car again.
Why is it still, though, it still seems that electric cars are still out of reach for so many people?
I do think that is a problem. I think we're going to see an absolute flourishing of the range and pricing of electric car models in the next 5 years. I think it's going to be a very fast-changing landscape. The technology's improved rapidly over the last 5 years and will continue to do so.
I better get rid of my car before it's not worth anything.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably not a bad thought, to be honest with you. But I mean, people may disagree with me about these things. These are my opinions. And one of the things that I wanted to start in our community is a conversation about these things. People will have questions about that. People say, well, I need a car with a longer range, and there are definite problems. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers. This is not why I put that video or the book out there to say I know all the answers. You know, I can tell you exactly what to do. I don't. You know, and there are people in our community who know a lot more about every single sector of this problem, with the possible exception of the electric system, which I happen to know a fair amount about now, having worked in that sector for the last 10 years. But I think that the area which I'd really like to think about with our community, so we've got cars, that's a big part. Actually, we're not driving much these days. We're walking a lot more, so it's less of a problem than it was. But the use of, normally, using public transport is a big carbon saving compared to driving around and walking and cycling. But, you know, using electric cars can be and will be in the next 10 years zero carbon. So that's, you know, that's a huge step forward, huge. But the heating is the one where the country as a whole has really fallen behind, and where perhaps we could have more of a leadership role. So there are a couple of routes being considered for. So, sorry, behind me you'll see, the flues for my gas boilers. I have a gas boiler. I have a gas boiler there. Out of that gas boiler every year comes 12 tons of carbon dioxide. That's very interesting. That's, by the way, that's like 10 wheelie bins. If it was solid, not gas, it would be 12 wheelie bins full of carbon dioxide every week. That'd be putting out the front of my house. So as I said on the video, it's invisible, you can't smell it, you can't see it. So, but if it was a column, it would be like kilometers high by the end of the year.
So what do we do?
So we have to think about. So we have to think about how
Solar?
we decarbonise that. So solar is a way of generating electricity, or also warm water. In Israel, they use solar thermal a lot on their roofs for most of their hot water.
Do we have enough?
I think solar panels on roofs here would be useful, but they're not a replacement for the heating. They're a different thing. They generate electricity. Solar thermal is probably not as good, so probably not appropriate for the UK. Again, it's not an area that I know about, it's an area I'm trying to learn about. But I think that what we probably need to do is electrify heating. So instead of having a gas boiler run by putting in methane and burning the methane, I think we probably need to have an electric boiler, an equivalent to an electric boiler. And there is a great technology called a heat pump, and I think heat pumps are tremendously effective. They're like 4 times as efficient as a gas boiler. These are a lot less input energy. And one of the things that I think I'd like to really think about as a local project would be the decarbonisation of the heating in our homes. And I think that'd be a very interesting conversation to have. And there's a lot of stakeholders, because Hampstead Garden Suburban Trust has a voice in these things. Our buildings we're in a very tightly regulated conservation area, so they'll have an interest. We have local architects.
Sorry?
We have local architects who can help us.
Right.
We have local engineers who can help us. There's a school in the area. There's a couple of schools in the area. You know, maybe we can work together with them and with the council. I think that would be a really, you know, good project for the shul to consider.
That's excellent.
And for the community to get behind.
Well, thank you, Jonny. Thank you for everything you do, not just for our community, but really for the planet, to be frank. You know, if there's any way that any of us can get more involved, please do. Don't ever hesitate. Don't think that it sounds like you're a one-man campaign. I think a lot of us just don't know how to become engaged, but we want to, and we believe in it, and we believe in you. And you know, let's fire up those electric cylinders.
That'd be electrify everything. That could be our motto. No, that would be. I really think our shul has a lot of talent, a lot of people involved in business, a lot of people involved in education, And we can be a high impact organisation, a high impact community in this very important matter. And you know, the world that we leave behind will be a testament to the work that we put into it. So anyway, it's a good time here with the Sukkot about to get put up. It's nice we can sit outside and enjoy nature. Thank you very much. Chag Sameach to you too.
It was really fascinating to hear the way Jonny got involved in really preparing this video.
Passionate, very
passionate. I mean, unfortunately, you could hear the banging, the next door neighbor's construction. I mean, as you probably can hear, you know, being outdoors, you really get...
That's the thing. We hear the strimmers and the tree cutters. We get that every day here, but now that we're outside, so we do apologise for any background noise.
Everything comes with a price.
Sorry.
But, you know, it's really actually... Everything is hashgacha pratis, right? We know there's everything is at, you know, at the right time at the right place, and it just happened to be that on September 28th, world leaders promised to protect the planet Earth. They all 64 countries came together to sign. Did you hear about this?
I saw something in the news. So I think the message is getting through. What have you got there?
So they
in the studio.
Yeah. So this in the studio. So this is my, you know, my husband ordered this for the kids. The week in junior, you get so much information. It's so amazing, and it's great for the kids and for myself as well, to be honest. And they say here that there's they pledge for nature. The 10-point document is a promise to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. I mean, that's already it's a pledge. It's something that that's been it's at the highest political level, and I think that's what really Jonny's talking about.
I think that's what's got to start, hasn't it?
Exactly.
Well, what are they planning on actually doing though?
Right. So, I mean, what can we do as personally? I mean, and I think that's what, you know, Jonny really mentions. He talks about two areas: the car, and you drive an electric car.
Yeah, I drive a hybrid.
That's amazing.
I'm saving the world. I am.
Yeah, absolutely. We have yet to switch ours. You know? Right. So every little bit counts. I think is really what's important, and the electric, you know, the heating, the gas. The gas is a big factor.
So we do have a gas heater at home, but the shul has the eco-friendly boiler. You do know that they've had it for several years already.
Right.
And that's very, very eco-friendly.
Right.
Don't think we've got that at home now.
Right, but it takes time. I mean, you know, they're saying here in 1949, just in 1949, the law was passed to set up a national parks, and the first one. Do you know what the first national park was in the UK?
Hampstead Heath?
No, the Peak District, the National Peak District.
Yeah,
and we made it there this summer. We were actually we vacationed in Nottingham. And we were not too far.
Nottingham.
Yeah. And I said, we got to go see this national. I didn't even know this history of it. And really, we finally made it out there. Actually, we missed the first exit.
Well, the Peak District's further north than Nottingham, isn't it?
It is a little further north, but not too far. It's like a half-hour drive. Beautiful, beautiful. And on the map, actually, there are areas of natural beauty. Yeah, outstanding natural beauty. AONBs. And there are like 48 of them around, and
there's a lot in England.
I actually made my family go. I Google mapped it, and we made my family go for an hour drive into these areas of outstanding natural beauty, and it was like, you have reached your destination, and it was just like an empty, beautiful.
Well, that's nice.
But it was, you know
what?
Nature.
The UK actually is beautiful. If you go further north to the northwest to the Lake District, it's unbelievably beautiful. The problem is the weather. That's why people jet off all around the world.
All right.
Go down south to Cornwall, southwest. It's beautiful, right? And Wales, it's Scotland, the northeast coast, Northumberland, the whole area. Beautiful, beautiful country. But people don't like the British weather, so when people want a holiday, they go further away. But I think this year
we had
we were in the Lakes about a month ago. It was absolutely mobbed. I've never had traffic in the Lake District before, but this time it was. Because people who would have travelled otherwise, depreciating the greatness that UK has to offer. There you go.
Absolutely. So we do live in a beautiful world, and for those of you who have missed the video that we shared, here's the beautiful film that Jonny made with Gary Crystal on understanding the nature and how we can help preserve it.
Yeah. So let's see the actual video that was produced, endorsed by Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mervis.
The Talmud in Masechet Tanit tells the well-known story of Jonny HaMagil, a great rabbi of 2,000 years ago who once saw an old man planting a carob tree. Jonny laughed at him and he said, "Don't you know that carob trees take 20 to 30 years to bear their fruit?" The old man said, "I'm not planting this tree for myself. I'm planting this tree for my descendants." Jonny went off laughing. The deep sleep came upon him. He woke up after 70 years. And then he came outside and he saw little children playing games while munching delicious carrots. He said to them, "Where's the old man who was planting the tree?" "Ah," they said, "our legendary great-grandfather. He passed away many years ago, but it's thanks to him that we today are safe and happy and healthy." The Talmud tells the story in order to highlight for us the responsibility we have not just to look after our world of today, but rather to invest in a good, safe and healthy world for the generations to come. It is for this reason that issues such as climate change should not be allowed to be peripheral matters to deserve the attention and fascination of just a few people, but on the contrary, climate change needs to be one of our top priorities. We must fulfill the biblical command of da uleshomra, to work in this world and to guard it for the future. For this reason, I commend Jonathan Waxman and the Hampstead Garden Suburb Shul for all that you are doing to highlight this hugely important issue for us. A huge יישר כוח to you all.
Thank you, Chief Rabbi. I'm Jonny Waxman. I have lived in Hampstead Garden Suburb since 1986 and been a member of HGSS all that time, raising my family here and taking an active role in the life of this wonderful, warm community. As the name suggests, this is a beautiful part of the world, with trees, green spaces and the changing seasons an integral part of our daily life. This is one of the views I have enjoyed almost every day since we moved here, on my walk to Golders Green Station, or these days, just my government mandated daily. I want to talk today about nature and our place as humans in it, and in particular about the climate crisis. Especially I want to tell you why and how I believe we can rise to the challenge of averting the climate crisis before it gets any worse. This is another picture of where I live. This photo was taken by astronaut Bill Anders in December 1968 from Apollo 8, the first human mission to the moon. So beautiful, but also, for the first time in human history, appearing small, maybe even fragile. The Earth hangs in space and is the recipient of the bounty of sunshine all year round, and that sunshine is the ultimate source of the energy that powers all life on Earth. The Earth is blanketed by a thin layer of gases, mostly the nitrogen and oxygen that we breathe, but also traces of carbon dioxide and others that have the fortunate property of acting like the glass on a greenhouse, and they keep the Earth's climate warm. Were it not for those greenhouse gases, the average temperature of the Earth would be -15 centigrade. Really not much fun for holidays. Instead, those greenhouse gases keep the Earth a nice cosy 15 centigrade. But you can't have too much of a good thing. Venus, whose atmosphere is made up largely of greenhouse gases, has an average temperature of 450 centigrade. So it's a real Goldilocks story. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that is what our planet is. For us, that is. However, the problem is that since the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, we have been using fossil fuels in ever-increasing quantities to do great stuff, but as a side effect, dumping steadily larger and now huge amounts of carbon dioxide and its even uglier sister methane into that thin layer of atmosphere on which all life on Earth relies. Look, here is a graph of the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide over my lifetime, and another one over the last 2,000 years. And exactly as Eunice Foote predicted in the 19th century,
As a result of the rising concentration of carbon dioxide and these other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, global temperatures are rising steadily. As you can see from this graph, the average global temperature has risen by around 1 degree centigrade over the last 100 years, with most of that in the last 50. What does this mean for us? Well, there is a huge amount of research that has gone into that very question. What will happen to us if we continue emitting greenhouse gases at the current pace? The answers range from terrible to catastrophic, and they read like a litany of the 10 plagues, but played out for millennia on a global stage. I will just highlight one effect that we are already seeing: rising sea levels as ice that is locked on land in Antarctica, Greenland and glaciers melts and runs off into the ocean. Sea level has already risen by around 20 centimetres, and we do not know how this may evolve in the future. But worryingly, the last time that global temperature was 1.5 degrees warmer than now, sea levels were 20 metres higher than current levels, meaning that most of London, or the area that is now London, was underwater. So what should we do about this? It's pretty straightforward. We just need to stop adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Stop burning coal, petrol, oil and gas. And research shows that pretty much when we stop adding greenhouse gases, the Earth's temperature will stop rising. It won't go back down for a long time, but it will stop going up. That's the good news. The bad news is that this is quite a tough thing to do, given just, for example, our gas boilers, our petrol cars and our jet fuel powered aircraft. And here is a graph of how carbon emissions have grown and how we need to bend the curve down to gradually bring the warming under control. And why have we done nothing about it? As you see, although climate change is well understood, what it is and why it is so dangerous, the emission of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere has not only continued, it has actually accelerated. How is that possible? It's simple. PPE. It's not the PPE you're thinking of. P for politics. Climate change is a very long-term problem, whereas we elect our government every few years. P is for psychology. Well, climate change is not one of these. So we feel pretty okay about not dealing with it just yet. E is for economics. The atmosphere is a free bin. It's available to all of us to use, and the carbon pollution we are putting in it is invisible, has no smell, and is not toxic. So why not? There are reasons for concern, maybe even room for anxiety, and I know I feel that sometimes. But there are also some great reasons to be cheerful. Number one, tremendous strides forward in developing technologies that can replace fossil fuels. There are many examples, but just for one, here is how the price of solar panels, a zero carbon source of energy, has fallen by more than 99% since 1975. 2. Where there has been policy put in place specifically to reduce carbon emissions, these policies have been stunningly successful. Here is a graph of how in 10 short years the annual carbon emissions produced by the generation of UK electricity have been reduced by 60%. The world is waking up and rousing from its climate slumber. New legislation whether it be the Global Paris Accord or UK legislation to reduce net emissions to zero by 2050, or simply the rising awareness across companies and society that climate change is an agenda-topping item that must be tackled. As the Chief Rabbi pointed out, the Torah says that we were placed in this Eden le'ovda u'l'shomra, to work in it and to look after it. Far from looking after our garden, we are actively damaging it. This must stop for our sake and for the sake of those who come after us. And let us be like Jonny HaMa'agel, be the person who builds a better world. Thinking about the climate crisis should inform our decisions about how we drive, what we eat, how we heat our homes, how we invest our savings, how we talk to our politicians, and how we vote. I would like to think that we, as a community, could start to have a proper conversation about this most important subject. And I, for one, dream of a net zero suburb by 2030. Thank you and Shana Tova.
Very well articulated film, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was really very well done. Yasher koach. And we do what we can, and you know, like we're in the season.
We are, because let's not forget the Chagim. When the Torah was given, it was very much an agricultural society, and our Yom Tov, the Chagim, are all based around agriculture. So Sukkot is called Chag HaAsif, the time when we gather in the produce. The Pesach is called Chag HaKotzer, the time of harvesting, and Shavuot is when the first fruits become ripe, and Chag HaBikurim, when we start bringing the first fruits. So it's very much based on agriculture. And we start, and our prayers are reflected in that as well. So on Pesach we stop praying for rain, while on Sukkot we pray for rain at the end. We only pray for rain this Shabbat on Shmini Atzeres, because we don't want the rain over Sukkot. I think actually here in England praying for rain is a great act of solidarity with our brethren in our beloved Eretz Yisrael in Israel, because we're standing here praying for rain. Right,
but you know, we're praying for rain. It's about praying. When we pray, we're praying that it comes at the right time.
Yeah, exactly.
With the right amount.
Yeah,
and I think that's a
that's
huge
why we say
part
it's not just the rain, but we want the blessing within the rain as well, because we don't too much, and we don't want it constant either.
That's absolutely, and it's a beautiful
enough
prayer.
That the crops should grow. We should have good produce.
Right. So we do hope that people come to Shul and be able to hear Chazan Avrami do his Tfilas Geshem so beautifully.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's happening on
Shabbat this week. Yeah,
Shmini Atzeres. So Shmini Atzeres. Oh, and we have a very special guest.
In the presence of the Chief Rabbi.
That's right. We have a very special guest this weekend. So we hope, and he's going to go to the youth as well, but just in the main shul.
Yes, so we'll be addressing the youth.
So we hope to see a lot of people there. And tomorrow night, we have a virtual sukkah hop.
Yes, we can't be going to other people's sukkahs.
We're still limited by the number 6.
So join us virtually, where we'll be going round different members' sukkahs, see what they've done, let them share their thoughts, some music perhaps. I think it'll be a very nice event for an hour.
That's right, and we'll really get to see we'll go with the rabbinic team as well. So we're going to be seeing all your beautiful. I can
give you a quick preview now, Rabbi.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Let's give them a little taster about what they're going to see. Here, get the close-up of Abigail's artwork. There you go.
Our curtains, which match the walls.
Okay, save some for Tuesday night. So that's tomorrow, 8 o'clock.
Yep.
And we hope to see everybody there.
This week's edition, we will finish off with a nice number from Chazan Avrami, Ufrois Aleinu Sukkot Shlemecha, which we say in our prayers every Friday night. May God spread His tabernacle of peace, Sukkot Shlemecha, over all of us, all of Israel, and all of humanity. Amen.
Amen. Right, just a little clip of what he did beautifully on Thursday night.
Yes, I hit from his sukkah at the Sukkot special.
Exactly, but he'll be joining us as well tomorrow night, so we'll get a little bit more from that. But here we have Ufras, what was it? There you go.
Enjoy the rest of the Chag.
Yes.
Moadim l'simcha, as we seem to be saying now.
Like a Chag Sameach, like you said.
Chag Sameach, Good Yom Tov, whatever you want. Good Moed.
Good Moed, that's right.
Good Vach, Shavuot
Tov. Oh, how was your talk, the Chol Moed Shir?
Oh, about Halashkas.
Halashkas.
I saw this
red cabbage.
Thought. We spoke about the history of food. The German word for cabbage, well, there's kraut, but there's also kol. And they cook it with water, so it's kol mit Wasser. And we say in the prayers, kol mit Wasser.
Kol mit Wasser,
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. That's right.
Like
okay, my husband did come home and tell me that one. That was great. Excellent. Yeah. So you eat this red cabbage?
I love it. Not red cabbage.
What is it?
Green cabbage.
Green cabbage.
Stuffed with meat and rice.
Stuffed with meat and rice. Okay.
The sauce is optional. I'm not so keen on the sauce, if I'm honest with you, but I love it. I love it. It's traditional foods are very important.
Tradition, that's
Absolutely.
Right. So we hope to see you in Shul on Shabbat with the Chief Rabbi. So good Moed and Chag Sameach.
Succot.